Ja, ons gesels oor taalbeleid in skole en dit was hoofnuus die afgelope ruk gewees, veral in Afrikaanse skole. En ons gesels met 'n verteenwoordiger van die onderwysdepartement oor die taalbeleid in skole en wat die toekoms moontlik kan inhou en in hierdie verband. En ons sê baie welkom aan Mhlanga eerder. Hy was al hier gewees en hy is die hoofdirekteur mediaskakeling departement van basiese onderwys. Welcome.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you so much
Nice to have you here again.
Yeah, thanks.
Now, Elijah, language policies in schools have always been a controversial issue in South Africa. And let's start off with a statistic, or some statistics. How many children in South Africa attend primary and high schools?
We have 12 million children in our schools, and they are in 25,000 schools, and we have 400,000 teachers.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And I mean, it gives you a bit of a perspective. The scale, you know, if people say, yes, but there's chaos in, what's the area in Limpopo now? The Duane, yes. But that's the thing. I mean, when it happens there, and you think it's like, let's say 10 schools, you don't realize it's actually not that big if you think it's 25,000 schools, you know. But with media, everyone just gets so excited and, it blows it up so much, you know. So, but I think I didn't know it's that scale. If you take between 50 and 60 million people in South Africa, 12 million is still at school. It's amazing.
That is baie.
Yeah.
I wanted to get to the statistics on and the ratio between teachers and scholars. How many teachers are there in South Africa? And statistically, what is the ratio between educators and learners, and does it differ across the provinces?
Yeah, it differs across the provinces because they are not the same in size. That's why you have differences. But what you have is a 12 million learners with 400,000 teachers, and you find that the ratio is anything between like one teacher for 35 kids, but in some cases you find that there's 50 learners or even more. So you have overcrowding. And you have a big problem in Gauteng and Western Cape, where you still have learners who are not yet placed because there's not enough spaces for them in schools, particularly in the urban centers.
I know there was at one stage someone said it, the budget was 1.2 billion and the government used 400 million to build schools. Is that truth behind that, or I mean, what's the what's die oplossing? How can we fix that problem of too little schools?
It's two things. The first one is that there's not enough land. So you might have the money, but there's no space to build those schools because most of the land that's around here is not suitable for schooling.
And you must buy it.
Yeah, the other thing, it's privately owned by people who own all sorts of land for different reasons. So that's the first one. The other one is that where you build schools, you also need to make sure that there will be enough people in the future who will live in that area. But in Gauteng, you have a challenge where this is the smallest province in terms of geographical size, but it has the largest number of people. So the movement is also important. You can't just build a school anywhere without taking into account what is going to happen. So those are some of the things that we need to take into account. So you can build as many schools as you want, but for example, in the Eastern Cape, we're building lots of schools, but most of those brand new schools, state of the art, are half empty because people are moving to the urban centers. So we also need to understand that part, that the people that are in the cities are coming from rural areas. So what we need to do is to fix all our schools in every part of the country to make sure that people stay where they are.
Let's talk about education in home language. I want to know what the percentage of learners have access to education in home language.
Well, when we mean home language, are we talking about the language of learning and teaching, or are we just talking about the availability of all these languages? Because that's the other thing that we need to take into account. What we have done as a department is to make sure that all African languages are available in all schools. We know that some schools do not offer any African language, but we are finding more and more that schools are beginning to embrace all African languages, especially the previously marginalized. So you have a huge number. I mean, of the 12 million kids, you have about 8 million or so who are learning in their own languages, although others choose other languages, although their own languages are available. So we need to take that into account. We want the South Africa where all the African languages are available at the school so that learners are able to choose any language that they wish to pursue.
Well, no, sorry. I just want to find out with the 12 million, how many, especially just for our program as well with Afrikaans viewers and listeners, if you think brown and white Afrikaans speaking, what percentage, how many of the 12 million are Afrikaans learners, let's say in grade
So
1?
it's very small. You know, I have stats for high schools. I know that we have 6,000 high schools, 6,600 high schools in South Africa, and only 250 in fact, are Afrikaans only schools. And about 350 are English and Afrikaans schools. So that should give you a perspective. And if you were to add primary schools, I know that we had about 3,700 schools that were in the cities, which means they could either be Afrikaans or English. So you can extrapolate from there to see how many schools would be. But the majority, even from that number, would be English schools.
How many children do you estimate still need access to education in English?
There's a lot. You know, in South Africa, we have received many people from outside the country, rather, and most of them they settle down in the urban centers. That's why you see such a demand for schooling in our cities. But we also have people who come from other parts of the country moving into the urban centers, and most of them they choose English as a preferred language for teaching or even for learning. So that's what you have. And what you then have as a challenge is that you find that there's some African schools which cannot admit those learners because it's an Afrikaans only school. And that creates a problem because you find that the school is not completely full. If it were to move to a dual medium school, it could accommodate more learners. We have a real challenge in South Africa because, remember, those kids that are not able to find spaces, they come from all races. So it's not about whether you speak Afrikaans or not. It's about a child needing space in a school in the Western Cape and in Gauteng. And now you're seeing more and more the other centers, Durban as well, Polokwane as well. You go to the city center of Polokwane, you'll still find children today who are not placed. And they come from all over Polokwane and you know, even the farm schools are full. So, you know, you have that challenge. There's such a huge demand for education in South Africa today.
Definitely.
Elijah, in 2016, the Constitutional Court ruled that provincial education departments could exercise reasonable control in terms of admissions to public schools. Can you give us an overview of this matter?
Yes. What has happened is that the Schools Act empowers parents via the school governing body to determine the admission policy for their schools in terms of language and other things that are related to admissions. But then you found that some SGBs started abusing that power that the law had given them to block certain or prevent certain children who cannot speak a particular language from being admitted at particular schools. And due to the demand for schooling, particularly in provinces like Gauteng, the matter ended up in court because parents felt that they too had the right to take or enroll their children in a school nearest to them, which happens to be an Afrikaans-only school. And the matter was settled in a way that now it's the provincial department that has the final say on what can happen, because then, you know, schools were doing whatever they wanted to the disadvantage of some of the children. So now it's only a province that can make that determination to say a school is full or not and who can be admitted or not. But as a national department, we are working on reviewing some of the legislation to make sure that we create an inclusive environment where everyone will be able to attend the school nearest to them without any challenges. If there are language issues, then we create more space for both languages to be accommodated. We'll bring teachers, make the budget available, because all of those things are possible. We need to make sure that we protect all our languages and we need to make sure that we promote all of them.
Now, we will get to specific cases later in our discussion, but I'd like to know what are the possible implications of this decision in combination with the statistical needs we discussed earlier, especially focusing on Afrikaans schools.
Well, it means that the Afrikaans-speaking learners would have to mingle with learners who speak other languages in the same environment, which we believe is good for social cohesion, for social harmony, and for unity in this country. because if we continue to have learners who speak only a particular language in one group, we are creating a discrimination. It's basically apartheid, if you want to call it that, because we are saying only certain people are allowed to be in this environment and others are not. So what we need to do is to go back, look at our schools and say, what is it that we can do to make sure that all other learners can come to this school? If it means we build more classrooms in that school, we'll have to expand it. If it means we bring more teachers to those schools, we'll have to do that. And that will also help because it will create more employment for local people, but also open up our schools to become centers of interaction by everyone from everywhere. Because, this country, whether you want it or not, it has become so cosmopolitan that we have people from all over the world now. And we need to make sure that we accept everyone. Everyone has a right to be here. And we, therefore, as government, have a responsibility and an obligation to make sure that we create the right environment, we provide and protect everyone's cultural rights without putting anyone in a disadvantage, because it's very important that we do that. Every language needs to exist and it needs to prosper. We just need to make sure that it does not prosper at the expense of another. That's why we feel that all these languages and all these cultures must be given free expression in an environment that will allow everyone to feel like they're a full citizen in this country.
Do I understand you correctly? Let's say we discuss it quickly. I stay next to 2 Afrikaans schools that's well known and very big. It's like, let's say the past 20 years, if they decided, okay, fine, we're still an Afrikaans, majority Afrikaans school, but let's create an extra part of the school that can take 200 children and teach them in English. Is that the route we're looking to go forward to?
Absolutely. We want everyone to be able to coexist in exactly the same environment because they will play together. And you will see in time that even that need to keep them separate will disappear because kids don't behave as we do. We have our own issues. They don't. They see things as they are and they will interact very easily. And in no time, we have seen many schools, dual medium schools are growing because as they introduce English and thinking that they will be phasing out another, it doesn't happen. It becomes an area or a school where everyone coexists very easily. And as we move, you'll see that we will become more understanding of each other as we become to as we come to live and work and play together.
Ons gesels verder met 'n verteenwoordiger van die onderwysdepartement oor die taalbeleid in skole en wat die toekoms moontlik in verband kan hou. Mhlanga is die hoofdirekteur mediaskakeling by die departement van basiese onderwys. Jornay, jy het vroeër 'n punt aangeraak wat jy net verder wil oor gesels.
We discussed like in Afrikaans school, a big Afrikaans school, let's say to help with this problem, create space for 200, let's say, English learners. But if that happens, the practical and logistical implications to switch from a single or to dual medium education, what is that entails?
Well, it would mean that we make more teachers available to teach in those other languages. But we'll also find that even in that African school, there are teachers who can teach in English. So you will talk to them and make sure that they teach other learners as well. It might create more work for them, but we'll have to provide as a department to make sure that there's enough material, there is enough time, there's enough physical space to ensure that everyone is comfortable. Because you don't want to expand the school and then create a problem. You don't want to do that. You want to be solving a problem of making sure that more learners access that school, but also people remain comfortable and teachers still continue to enjoy the work that they do. So you are only making the situation better, improving the conditions, and not bringing anything down, because that's not the point. All that you want to do is to make sure that learners access the school, whatever language or whatever cultural background they come from.
I want to get to the Pretoria-based Oeverkruin and Montana High Schools, and they have been instructed to accommodate English pupils in 2017. Now, do you think it's reasonable to implement this type of decision on such short notice?
It's not. It's not reasonable, especially if you have not taken into account all the implications. But let's also remember that there's a huge problem with spaces in Gauteng. So the MEC might have thought about it and maybe there's a plan in terms of finding teachers and making the budget available to try alleviate the problem that we have. Because that's the other thing. When you see 15,000 learners after schools have opened, still in queue, still in line, still sitting at home, you need to think creatively, even if it means you do something that people are not thinking you will do, such desperate measures of instructing a school to open up. You know, it's a principle that matters, that the school needs to prepare itself for such, even if it does not happen successfully this year. But for the following year, we need to make sure that that school is prepared adequately to ensure that those learners are accommodated in those schools. Because building schools is not enough. We also need to look around at every possible space and accommodate those learners. Because the reality is that all the schools in Gauteng are full. The schools that parents want to take their children. So what do? You extend the ratio from 1 to 35 to 1 to 45. Already you are creating a problem. It means that a teacher will not be able to walk around inside the classroom. They're teaching more kids, and they don't have the time to pay attention to each individual child as they used to do before, because now there's more kids than they had before. So all of those things, we need to consider them so that when there are solutions that are being proposed, such as instructing certain schools to open up the spaces, we need to look at it in that context to say we are trying to address a much, much bigger problem.
There's one question here. Someone asked, what do you think is an acceptable class size?
Yeah. Or the ratio between teachers and scholars.
It should be 1 to 35 or 1 to 40. Yes. Now it's been increased. But you always find that a school has spaces for 400 kids and you have 1,500 applying for space. What do you do? And every one of those people say, we live around this school. We live in this community. Where else do you want us to go? You refer them to another school in another part of the city. They say, no, we don't want to go there. We want to enroll our kids here. We don't work. We are unemployed. We don't have transport and all of those things. So what do you do? And they are right. But you also need to say, yes, I'm correct in saying the school is full. And then somewhere in between, a solution must come out. That's why you see such instructions to say, you two schools, please make space for other learners in addition to what you already have. So those are the things that we need to think about. So going forward, the Africans-only schools must think carefully about what the future holds, because there's pressure for spaces. We are not saying that we are doing this to spite people. It's not about that. I mean, everyone can see. Even today, as I speak to you, there are learners who are still battling for spaces, particularly here in Pretoria. In Gauteng as well, I mean in Johannesburg as well. So it's a reality that is there, and if we don't solve it in an orderly way, it's going to explode in our faces. We'll be left with a big crisis.
But isn't that a quick fix in the matter that what happens if the school reaches its maximum capacity? What's the solution then?
The MEC of Education in Gauteng has said that every month in 2017, we will be opening a new school. And it's been doing so since about 2013, 2014, thereabouts. They've been opening new schools. So they're building new schools. But the problem is that every time Gauteng opens a new school and we make a big noise about it on TV and you guys cover it in the news as well, we are attracting other people from outside the province to come here, because we are saying in Gauteng we can build schools, we are successful, we can bring technology into the classroom, and because of that, people want to come to Gauteng. So every time we solve this problem, we're creating two others.
Last question. How can the public be actively involved in possible solutions?
It is very, very important that all the people that have children in schools, I'm talking about them in particular because they've got direct interest in the affairs of a school. Make sure that you attend meetings. Make sure that when you get to those meetings, you raise your hand and speak up about whatever issues that are affecting your children, because that's how you will protect the school. That's how you're going to make sure that the school is run properly, the school is maintained, and everything is done properly. And if we can do that, then you'll find that all our schools are run professional. You won't worry about whether you want to go to an Africans-only school, whether you want to go to a school outside the city, whether it's in a township or wherever. You won't even worry about that. You will look at the quality that school is producing. And that's the country that we need to begin to move towards.
And I think as well, the moment you mention Afrikaans, you mention schools, you mention government, people are immediately on the fence. And I think that's... We have to look at ourselves and say, listen, let's work together and not be so defensive on these things. And a practical, the ironic example is Hendrik Verwoerd High School in Pretoria is one of the best integrated schools in the country, to the irony of it. But thank you so much.
Great.
Rian, Elijah, Mhlanga.
Ja, thank you Elijah. Always nice chatting to you. Dit was dan Elijah Mhlanga. Hy is die hoofdirekteur media skakeling by die Departement van Basiese Onderwys.